The 20th century witnessed numerous conflicts that shaped and transformed world history. From the devastating world wars to the tensions of the Cold War, these conflicts not only defined borders and governments, but also deeply influenced the global economy, culture, and society. This list covers some of the most significant conflicts of the 20th century, highlighting their causes, developments, and repercussions. Let's get started. Number 1. The Russian Revolution, 1917. Did you know that this uprising not only overthrew the Tsar, but also gave birth to the Soviet Union, the first communist state in the world? The Russian Revolution of 1917 was the result of a combination of political, social, and economic factors that led to widespread discontent among the population. Various factors gave rise to that revolution, among which stand out discontent with the Tsarist regime, the autocracy of Tsar Nicholas II, and his inability to address the needs of the people generated profound discontent. Political repression and the lack of civil liberties also contributed to the unrest of the Russian people. Economic conditions. The Russian economy was in crisis, with uncontrolled inflation and a shortage of food and basic goods. World War I exacerbated these problems as resources were allocated to the war effort, leaving the population in conditions of extreme poverty. Social inequalities. Russian society was deeply divided, with a small aristocratic elite enjoying privileges, while the majority of the population, consisting of peasants and workers, lived in misery. Social differences and the lack of social mobility fueled the discontent. Influence of revolutionary ideas. Socialist and communist ideas gained popularity among the population, especially among workers and peasants. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, took advantage of this discontent to organize and mobilize the masses. The revolution initiated the Russian Civil War, which lasted from 1917 to 1922, generating a conflict between the Bolsheviks and the anti-Bolshevik forces, culminating in the Bolshevik victory and the creation of the Soviet Union. Number 2. World War I, 1914 to 1918. It was a global conflict that occurred between 1914 and 1918. Involving many of the world's major powers and resulting in great destruction and loss of life. It was triggered by a series of events, the most immediate being the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria on June 28, 1914. However, the deeper causes of the conflict included imperial rivalries, complex military alliances, and heightened nationalism. The world's major powers were divided into two alliances: the Triple Entente, composed of France, the United Kingdom, and Russia, and the Triple Alliance, formed by Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, although the latter joined the Entente in 1915. The conflict was characterized by the brutality of trench warfare on the Western Front, where millions of soldiers lived and died under hellish conditions. The Eastern Front saw more fluid movements, with large battles and territorial changes. The war introduced new technologies, such as the use of chemical weapons, tanks, and airplanes, which forever changed the nature of warfare. The entry of the United States in 1917 tilted the balance in favor of the Entente, and the Russian Revolution of 1917 led to Russia's withdrawal from the conflict. The war ended on November 11, 1918, with the signing of the armistice and the victory of the Triple Entente. The consequences of the war were profound, and the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 imposed harsh conditions on Germany, redefined borders in Europe and the Middle East, and had devastating social and economic impacts. Some of its main battles were Battle of Tannenberg, August 26 to 30th, 1914. Germany defeated Russia. Battle of the Marne, September 5th to 12th, 1914. The Allies, France and England, defeated Germany. Battle of the Masurian Lakes, September 7th to 14th, 1914. In this battle, Germany defeated Russia. Battle of Verdun, February 21st to December 19th, 1916. France emerged victorious, defeating Germany. Battle of the Somme, July 1st to November 18, 1916. In this battle, the Allies, France and England, faced Germany, but there was no clear winner. And finally, the Second Battle of the Marne, July 15 to August 6, 1918. In this battle, the Allies, France, England, and the USA, defeated Germany. Next, our number 3, the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939. It was a conflict between the Republican and nationalist forces in Spain, which resulted in the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, a dictatorship that lasted until 1975. The Spanish Civil War, which took place between 1936 and 1939, was a major internal conflict that pitted the Republican side, made up of forces loyal to the Second Spanish Republic, against the rebel or nationalist side, led by General Francisco Franco. The causes of the conflict were manifold, including political, economic, and social instability, as well as ideological polarization between the left and the right. The conflict began with an attempted coup on July 17, 1936, carried out by a faction of the military, and lasted until April 1, 1939, when the nationalists achieved victory. The Republican side was supported by leftist parties, anarchists, and communists, while the nationalist side received support from conservatives, monarchists, and fascists. Internationally, the Republicans were aided by the Soviet Union and the international brigades, while the nationalists were supported by Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. The war was extremely brutal and resulted in a devastating toll of approximately 500,000 deaths and thousands of displaced people. It was characterized by intense battles, indiscriminate bombings, and fierce repression from both sides. The victory of the nationalists led to the establishment of a military dictatorship under Francisco Franco's regime, which lasted until his death in 1975. The war left deep scars on Spanish society and had a lasting impact on the country's political and social history. We continue with number 4, the Cold War, 1947 to 1991. It was a period of political and military tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, which included indirect conflicts such as the Korean War and the Vietnam War. The Cold War, which lasted from 1947 to 1991, was a period of intense rivalry and tension between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. This conflict was not fought through direct combat between the two nations, but through a series of indirect wars and regional conflicts, known as proxy wars, in which both powers supported different sides. It arose after the end of World War II, as ideological, political, and economic differences between capitalism and communism became increasingly apparent. During this period, the world was divided into two blocks: the Western Bloc, led by the United States and its NATO allies, and the Eastern Bloc, led by the Soviet Union and its Warsaw Pact allies. During this time, both sides engaged in an arms and space race, developing nuclear arsenals and competing for technological supremacy. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 was one of the most critical moments, where the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. Some significant events include the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961, which became a symbol of the ideological division between East and West, the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, and the Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, where the United States and the Soviet Union supported different factions. Additionally, there was the emergence of decolonization movements in Africa and Asia, with both superpowers attempting to influence the newly independent states. In the economic sphere, the Marshall Plan promoted by the United States helped rebuild Western Europe, while the Soviet Union implemented 5-year plans to consolidate its control over Eastern Europe. Propaganda and espionage played crucial roles in the psychological warfare between the two superpowers. The conflict culminated with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, marking the end of the Cold War. This period left a lasting legacy in international politics and laid the foundation for the multipolar world we live in today. Number 5, the Korean War, 1950 to 1953. It was a military conflict that pitted North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, against South Korea, backed by the United States and other allied countries under the UN mandate. The conflict began on June 25, 1950, when North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel and invaded South Korea. The war was marked by intense fighting and shifts in territorial control, including the intervention of Chinese troops in support of North Korea. Throughout the war, several important battles took place, such as the Battle of Incheon, where UN forces led by General Douglas MacArthur carried out a successful amphibious landing that allowed them to retake Seoul and change the course of the war. However, the Chinese intervention in November 1950 led to a series of counteroffensives that stabilized the front near the 38th parallel. The war ended in a stalemate with the signing of the Panmunjom Armistice on July 27, 1953, which established a demilitarized zone near the 38th parallel, maintaining the division of the Korean peninsula into two separate countries to this day. There was no clear winner as both sides claimed victory, and the territorial situation remained nearly the same as at the beginning of the conflict. Well, if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more amazing stories. Write in the comment box if you want a video on a topic of your choice. See you next time.